All right. So we'll go ahead and work through some of the questions that it had in the actual case discussion on iLearn. So the first question is, what made Noodles and Company an attractive opportunity for Aaron Kennedy in 1995?
Well, one of the things that I saw in the case study was that there was no really fast food restaurant with noodles, except for like the one that he went to that he thought was a genius idea. And the fast casual market was new, and so it wasn't too competitive yet.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was thinking as well. Um, is that really that fast casual segment was almost non-existent at the time. So there was a huge opportunity there to cash in on that new concept that basically didn't exist at the time. And he really had that great idea of using noodles and combining all different types of cultures with and different flavors from different countries, and incorporating that with noodles and really creating something new that didn't exist. And so I think that's really the opportunity that he saw.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was smart that he, like you said, did all over the world different dishes, and so that his customers could be, you know, anyone, and they could enjoy as long as they eat noodles, which I think in the case study it said like 90% of countries do, or something like that. So that really broadens the market, the target.
Yeah, I think it's basically every country uses noodles in some way, and you can pull the influence from those countries and make it a real cultural experience, trying all different kinds of stuff. And so that was one of the cool things I think about Noodles and Company.
Yeah.
So, what caused the company's early struggles, and why do you think that happened?
Well, one of the things that really caused the struggle was their um, like processing. I forgot what it's called. Um, like their software or system that they were using, because they didn't realize that their um, first store wasn't doing well until the fourth month, and when they had already committed to opening another store. Um, so I think that process.
Yeah, it was that disorganization of the system that, and they didn't have the proper, I guess, bookkeeping in place that allowed them um, to distinctly tell them early on what the problem was. And so I think, um,
Hello. Sorry for the wait.
oh, it's all good. So yeah, I think that that was a big part of it. The other part was that they hadn't really tested the concept either. They just jumped right in with the first store. He did think things out, but he hadn't really developed proper processes and really tested the concept or the idea before launch. And so it wasn't as appealing to customers as he thought it would be, especially with the steam tables. That the food wasn't as fresh as people were expecting it to be, and so it just kind of fell flat. And even the article that was written about them said it's a great concept, but it falls flat. It just doesn't meet expectations. And so I think that was part of the problem. It goes back to some of the other cases we read early on where they didn't really flush out the concept and really get customer buy-in before they launched the product.
Yeah, and to go along with that too, I feel like they didn't experiment enough with the menu. Like they said, one night they, were at home and with a bunch of the people and the chef and everything, and they just came up with the menu. But they didn't really think about how they were going to do each menu item as quickly as it needed to be, which factored into the poor quality of food.
Yeah. Yeah,
What question are we on? Sorry.
we're on question 2.
Okay. So,
Yeah, and I think part of that as well, like you were saying, is they just basically came up with a menu real quick, and they didn't test it either. They didn't make sure that it was appealing to customers. They just are like, hey, this is a menu we like, so let's go ahead and launch this menu, rather than getting input from customers to say, hey, well, maybe you want to try this differently, or I didn't really care for this dish, you may want to try something different, or there was too much of this or too much of that. So really getting that input from customers is, I think, what is important when you're launching a new company. And they could have done trial tests with people on the menu to see how they responded to the menu items.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been better.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said.
Seems like. Go ahead, Paula. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that I agree to what you guys said. Yeah. I mean, they should have done the menu better. They should have gotten more. They should have put more quality in their food, and yeah.
I was just gonna say, it seems like with all the case studies that we've read about that they didn't do their homework and really, receive the input from the customers, they've had a really rocky start, or they just like completely failed, because they created something that nobody wanted or didn't have a need for.
Yep. Yeah, and it's really interesting in my class last semester where we did the business model canvas, the launching the new venture. That was what was drilled into us week after week after week, is talk to your customers, talk to your customers, talk to your customers. And we actually had to go out and do interviews and talk to people and find out information from them and let them show them our product or let them use our product and then give us feedback on it. And it's really amazing what you can learn from that process. With me specifically, I thought that I had one customer segment for the product that I was creating for the class. And so I went out and tested it with that customer segment and found out they had no interest in it, but one of the other customer segments I hadn't really thought about ended up being really interested in it. And so through that testing process, I was able to completely switch the train of thought and focus on the customer that actually would benefit from the product, which some companies just don't do that.
Yeah. And they pay for it later.
Yep. All right. So on question number 3, what role should financing play in company growth? So I guess first let's ask, what did you guys feel should be the direction they go? Do you think they should franchise, or do you think they should go company growth?
I can go. I thought that they should franchise.
Okay.
I chose, and I thought that one because it's the best opportunity for them to have accelerated growth. And this fast casual restaurant industry, it's expected to grow between 15 to 20%. And the case study talked about a lot of competitors starting to come into that industry. And there's even some copycat like noodle companies that they haven't been a huge threat yet, but they said that they could see them being competitors. And so I think it's important for them to maintain their quality but grow as quickly as they can so that they take control of that market share instead of having a copycat or someone else do that and then they are second into each area and it's not as popular for them. And another benefit of franchising is that the Noodles and Company can grow on someone else's dime, and so they don't have to come up with all the capital to start every single one. And they talked about if they were going to do franchising, it would be like 50% of theirs and 50% franchising, so they would still have half of the ownership in the stores. And but yeah, I thought it would be good for them for the growth.
Okay. Paulette, what did you think?
I agree with the same thing. More than anything, I would go for the franchise as well because of the growth. It seemed like they wanted to grow and they wanted to. I mean, it was a very different concept. And as Andrea said, that they had competitors, but it wasn't. They were minor, so they really did have the opportunity to grow through this franchise opportunity. So, yeah, that's what I saw.
Yeah, and I actually went the opposite way. And the reason I did that is because they're not set up for franchising at this point in time. They would have to completely restructure the company to be able to handle franchising, because it did point out that to be able to do it, they would have to hire a new VP, they would have to hire new accountants, they would have to divide their real estate division. They would have to also keep an eye on quality through the other companies, which means they would have to hire more staff to keep an eye on the franchised companies. They definitely are in a position where their processes and their uniformity is in place to where they could franchise. I just don't think the organizational structure is there for them to franchise at this point. I do think that it is a great option for growth. And like you said, there are copycats. There are other companies that are coming into the market that are competitors that really they need to have kind of that first to market approach. But I just don't know that they're going to be able to do it through franchising at this point in time with the way the organizational structure is. And if you look at the numbers if you look at the numbers for franchising compared to company owned, there's a drastic difference. So they would have to do a lot of work for a fraction of the profit, where with the store owned, within 2 years, each store is making its profit back and doing well, substantially greater than what their income from franchising would be, which would allow them to be able to put that money in towards more company-owned stores and allow them to have that growth. Where I think if they went the franchising route, they would be able to grow faster with franchised restaurants. But I don't know that they would have as much revenue to put into their own company-owned stores.
Yeah, I agree. I could see that. I could see how they're just at the moment, as you said, they don't have enough, or they're not big enough, I guess, to go franchise. I could see that too. So yeah, maybe at the moment it's best to go company growth right now, and then perhaps in the near future be a franchise.
I guess as I read it, I just thought that I know that they could move forward with franchising and just kind of overhaul their organization. But yeah, I didn't look at all of the numbers for the
Yeah,
different
and
revenues based on franchising or company growth.
yeah, and I don't know if I did the numbers exactly correct. I used the numbers out of the case, but there could have been. I mean, there were 2 or 3 different numbers that you could have used too, based on the information I was looking at. But I can go ahead and share my screen real quick and show you what I was able to see. So if you look, the company-owned stores, the investment was $500,000, and they were saying that the store revenue average was about $1,125,000 a year, and the operation costs were 80% of revenue. So operating costs, which left a contribution margin of $225,000. And if you look at the actual investment of 500,000, and you divide 500,000 by the contribution margin, you'll see that it takes about 2.22 years to actually break even on that investment. The first year, they're going to be obviously in debt still, 275,000. Year 2, 50,000, but by year 3 they have $175,000 profit. If you look at the franchising model, They didn't have an investment up front because they're not investing in any property or anything like that. And all of the upfront costs that they have to help their franchisees get started is covered in that $35,000 franchise fee that the franchisor pays or franchisee pays. And so they didn't have any upfront investment. And then it said that their revenue was about, or I think it said that they get 5% is what their of revenue. So they get a 5% cut, and that's their commission or their royalties for franchising, is that they get 5% of revenue. So if you look at that, that means that their revenue coming in off of a franchise store would be about $56,000 per year. Their operating costs, it said, were 25%, which means their contribution margin is 75%. So based on that, they're making $42,187 a year per franchise store, which if you look to even get close to the $175,000 that they make in year 3, you're looking at least year 4 before they can do that. And then by year 4, you're looking at $400,000 revenue off of a company-owned store. So, I mean, there is quite a drastic difference in revenue. And as far as building the company and growth, the more revenue you have coming in, the more you're able to grow.
That's interesting.
Yeah, those are good numbers. I guess, I don't know, I think you can tell me what I'm missing or, if I'm seeing it wrong, but the way that I see it is because they said that they were still going to own 50% of the stores. And so I assumed that they were still going to be opening their own stores as well as franchising if they went that route. So it's like 50%, 50%.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know, in my mind, it makes sense for them to do the franchised route just because, like, they can still open their stores and get that revenue, but by franchising, that's just like additional revenue that's coming in,
So they would still open the same amount of stores whether they're doing franchised or not. So let me, because I have some of the data I need on this other sheet. So let me.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw the franchising. Yeah, because I thought that they were still going to open their goals, but the franchising option would just, I don't know, accelerate their growth and bring in some extra revenue that they weren't, that they wouldn't really get if they went the other route.
Yeah, so from what I was understanding, and it could be that I understood the case wrong, but from what I was understanding is that 50% of the new stores that they were opening, that was part of their goal, they were going to do franchised instead of company owned.
Okay.
Because yeah, if they were going to do that and then franchise as well, then of course it would make sense to go that route because you're still going to have
extra money.
You're getting extra money on top of what your goals are. But as far as I understood, let me actually pull up the case.
I think you're right. Because it said that they were going to open, I'm just looking at my notes that I took from the case, like 240 new stores is what they were thinking of opening. So they're thinking about franchising 50% of those, to reduce capital requirements and place some operational responsibilities on others, which would lessen their financial burden.
Yeah, so let me pull this information over real quick, and then I can kind of show you the numbers. So if we go, and I mean, also, if you're looking at it that way, they are basically not getting a profit for 2 years, which in company-owned stores, that could be a big problem too, because then that means they're sucking up revenue without getting revenue back to put into other stores. So that does kind of present a problem in that regard as well, that they would have to possibly come up with more financing to be able to do it that way rather than going with franchised stores. So that does, that is another piece of that.
And just getting their revenue immediately from those franchises.
Yeah. Yeah, so here, give me just a second. I'm working on some numbers here real quick. Here, I'll share my screen, at least so you guys can see what's. So in year one, that is the revenue, or let's see, year one. Actually, I messed that up. So year one would be equals this times the number of stores. And this would be equals this times the number of stores.
And did they give you those number of stores in the case?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how many stores they were planning on opening each year. So okay. 2003, 2004, 2005.
Yeah, I saw that. I just wanted to verify.
Yeah. And then that's year 3. Actually, I'm still doing that wrong. So it'd be that plus the year before. Wouldn't it? No. I'm trying to think through how to calculate that correctly. Oh, because yeah, we're doing it by year per store, per number of stores per year. So that would actually be 0, 0, 0, 0, because there's nothing coming in from those stores in that year. And then we need to put a total column here. So in year one, so I did have that part correct. So it would be this times this. And then in this one, then it would be equals this times this. And equals this.
Wouldn't it be the 23 instead of the 32 for year 2?
Well, because I'm doing,
this is just doing all of year 1 first. Okay.
Yeah.
Ignore me. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. And then this would technically be this times this. equals. And then this will tell us exactly how much the cost is. So in year 2, they're still over, they still are like 7 million in debt, 8 million in debt.
Yeah.
Then equals this. Yeah, I mean, when you look at it that way, but they're constantly adding more stores, and it is reducing the amount of debt that they have, but then they're still needing cash outlay, which means they're still having negative cash, which means that they will have to have financing to do those. So,
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it that way, the franchising may help offset part of that.
Yeah, help that financial burden.
Oh wait, was this 2? Okay, so this is actually, I did this wrong anyways. So that should be 32, and this one was 45. This one was 64. So it's 100. So 32, 45, 64, 100, and that equals their total of 241 stores that they're trying to open. So that, I mean, when you look at it that way, it does show you that there is quite a drastic cash outlay to be able to keep up with company growth rather than franchised growth.
Yeah.
But I mean, even by year 4, they are still making a profit, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's with all the stores open, right?
Yeah.
Your company.
So that's in year 5 would be with all of the stores open.
Okay.
Or wait, yeah, because it was 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006. So 4 years. Yeah. So in year 4, oh wait, this should be 64, and this should be 100. Okay, that makes a big difference in the. So they aren't making a profit yet at year 4, but let's see. Let's add a couple more years and.
Yeah, because they're going to have a bigger cut, you know, the 225,000 instead of the 42,000.
But yeah, so I mean, they're going to have a lot more stores at that point. Let me see. Did I? So if I anchor that. Oh wait, wrong one. And then I can actually. I'm going to go just a couple more so we can see what it looks like when they would start making a profit.
Okay.
Just so that kind of helps us get a bigger picture.
Thanks for giving us a visual.
Yeah, seriously.
And this one would be the same, so I just need to anchor that. Yeah, not a problem. I just started thinking about that, and I'm like, well, that could make a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh. And I mean,
so year 5, they're making a
Well,
profit.
yeah, year 5, they're making a huge profit of 44 million.
Yeah.
And by year 6, they're making almost 100 million profit.
wow.
Let's look at let's look at franchise. So year 1. So in year 1, that equals.
Like every time I see something like this, it makes me wish that I invented like Noodles and Company. You know?
That what?
That I wish it makes me wish that I invented Noodles and Company.
Yes.
But then, like after reading the case, I tried to put myself in their shoes, and I'm like, would I have stopped like after the second store, and and it was kind of a disaster, and they thought about quitting.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, hopefully, I'll have these good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's still not a bad profit when you look at it this way.
Especially since they don't have to
Oh,
do
wait.
as much work.
I screwed that up already, so I'm going to redo that. They still have a lot of work to do in starting the company. They just don't have as much work to do in running the company.
Right.
The operation.
And then that one's going to be a 0. Equals. And that one actually can be deleted. Oh, how did that happen? I was like, that number is not right.
I know, yeah.
So let's redo that. Equals this. That's the one I want to anchor. That's more like it. Or wait, no, that's still.
That's still the same.
Why did it do that?
Would you have to anchor that though?
Click on the M18 and see, push F2 to see what it's referencing.
So it's doing.
Like the bottom one in year 6. What is that?
Oh, yeah. So, but that's 2,000,000 one. Wait. Okay, so that number is correct. Okay, so then I need to drag that down, and that fixes it.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. So 20 million instead of 98 million.
Yeah. Well, but that's just franchising. So technically, then it would be, we would have to add what the company owned stores would be doing as well.
Oh yeah, for the 50%.
Oh. Yeah, so then under this model, I can basically, yeah, I'll just equals this times this. And then we're going to anchor that one. And these numbers should stay the same from up above because they're actually not going to start franchising for another year. And then this is where the change would be. So equals, oh wait, that's 0. Yeah, I think that's correct. So, and then we'll go. So then technically we're looking at equals this plus this. So it is a little bit different, but it's what, $15,000 difference, or 15 million?
Yeah.
Yeah, almost $15 million difference. So this is under the franchise and company owned model, where this one is just purely company owned.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at the difference, they don't make a profit till year 5, where in this one they're already
immediately.
well, let's look at this. So if we do equals this plus, I'm just going to look at one more thing. I'm going to put it off over here. So we're going to do see what equals this plus. I mean, at least it is helping cover the cost of the stores.
Right.
Technically, I should be able to drag that down. Yeah, so in this model, in year 3, they start making a profit, where this one, they don't start making a profit till year 5.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's almost like, I know 15 million is a lot of money, but I think it's almost worth sacrificing the 15 million and doing the franchise route to get their name out there instead of the competitors. You know,
Yeah, I
before
didn't
to
think about going
take over
this
the
route.
market share.
Yeah, I just was looking at the numbers here. But then, of course, that didn't account for the cost or what they would bring in from the actual company-owned stores at the same time as the franchise-owned stores. So this does skew the numbers. I mean, when you just look at this versus this, that's a drastic difference.
Yeah.
When you look at this versus this, that's not as drastic of a difference.
Yeah.
No. And the franchise, like you mentioned earlier, could help them not have to raise as much capital. They are getting, you know, the revenue from the franchise can help to cover their stores that they're opening as well.
Yeah, the other thing that you have to think about with this too, which it didn't give us the money to, or didn't give us the numbers to calculate it, is what the additional overhead costs are going to be associated with the franchise model.
Yeah.
I don't know if these operating costs include hiring a new VP and all the new staff and everybody else that they would have to hire to be able to manage the franchise piece of it. So it could be that it does cost more to do that route as well.
True. Yeah.
But I mean, looking at these numbers, it does make going with franchise stores more appealing because you're not having to keep that burden of dealing with managing all of that yourself. But that does also bring on the burden of having to manage other owners and dealing with that piece of it, which I don't know that I personally would want to take on, having to, especially at this early stage, the possibility of somebody screwing up your brand as you're trying to get growth going. So that's the other piece of it, is by franchising it, you could lose control of your brand a little bit, because they're so busy growing and so busy helping other stores franchise that they may lose that quality piece of it, because it's outside of their control by 100% control.
Yeah.
So really on this one, I'm still kind of, I was sold on definitely no franchise going into this, but I definitely, franchising seems like a much better option now. I still just don't know if it's the right option at this point, just because of all the other factors. It's not just the money, it's also dealing with control, dealing with the organizational structure, and dealing with all those changes to try and be able to reach the goals that they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Especially since they're still pretty early on in the company.
Yeah, because I mean, at this point, they have 50-something stores, which by no means is tiny, but it's definitely not as big of a competitor as some of the other chains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
So let's go back and answer, I guess, the final questions here. So what are the specific advantages and disadvantages of the franchising model for Noodles, including the financial, economic, and organizational consequences.
I feel like we've kind of been answering that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of advantages. Like you said, they can get out ahead of growth and be first to market. And they do have a lot of, I mean, they do have a great concept. They have, they've really done well with unifying everything to allow it to be used for a growth model as aggressive as they're looking at. So, I mean, and that does play well to franchising. But yeah, it just, and of course, financially, they wouldn't have to finance nearly as much of their growth if they include if they included the franchised model. But then again, they lose control and could possibly end up hurting their brand in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So it says, okay, so the next section is calculating what we just calculated, all the calculations we went through. That's the information that it is asking us to do next, and then that's basically all of the questions it had. So now where we're at, what are your feelings on what the best option is?
Either franchising or company growth?
Yeah.
I don't know, because I guess in a way they're both good. As we mentioned before, in the company growth, it's best for them to stay in a company growth at the moment because, as both of you mentioned, they're not big enough. They still need, I mean, they're not lacking money, but yet they're not big enough to go franchise. But then in the franchise, they do have a bigger opportunity to grow bigger and to market faster. So, I mean, they're both.
Yeah, this is probably, after looking at the numbers, this is probably one of the toughest cases to decide what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the ideal situation would be to, wait a few years, of course, and then go the franchising route. But since that's not one of the options to choose from, I'm still leaning towards the franchise because the revenue is comparable. They get money right away to help open the other stores. They don't have all of the financial burden on themselves, and they don't have as many competitors in the market yet.
Yeah.
And so it allows them to accelerate their growth and be that new restaurant in town instead of seen as a copycat of a different one that,
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would still lean towards the franchising route for those reasons.
And I think at the end of the day, they still went with franchising.
Actually, I know the outcome of this case because I've done this one before. They did actually stick with a company-owned model.
Really?
And then, yeah, and they held with the company-owned model for a few years until they launched their IPO, and that's where they got the majority of the financing to finish because then once they launched their IPO, then they were flooded with cash that they could use to finance their growth. And so that's the actual strategy that they took. But and I was dead set that was the correct way to do it. But now looking at the numbers, I could see it going either way. I could see either of these options being very viable options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but I think I'm still kind of torn more towards the company ownership, and it's just because of the fact that the organizational structure isn't set up to be able to handle it quite yet, and they don't have as much control over the brand, and as young as the brand is, that could hurt them. So I think I'm still kind of torn, but I'm leaning still more towards company owned. But this definitely did open my eyes more towards franchising being a very viable option.
Yeah, I just assume that if they're going to franchise in the future, that they might as well do the organizational now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think you're correct, Andrea. The best option would be to continue with the store-owned option for a few more years until they're able to really get that other piece of the organizational structure in place. And once they've, because if they waited even 2 more years, they would have over 100 stores, and that would really have solidified the brand in many markets. And then once the brand is solidified, then if they can branch out to franchising, it won't hurt the brand as much, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well.
All right.
Well, that's
so I think
our summary, right?
Yeah, because we've summed it up pretty well a couple of times. So, but yeah, I think this was a really interesting case. So.
Thanks for doing those Excel models. That helped a lot with the analysis.
Yeah, not a problem. So I'll go ahead and stop the broadcast.